What happens when a young truth-teller walks into the lion's den, armed not with power but with proof? That question would define the next 2 hours inside a federal courtroom in Atlanta, Georgia. The building stood like a fortress, its walls thick with silence and history. But today justice would not be whispered. It would be demanded. Inside courtroom 4B of the Federal District Court for Northern Georgia, the air was heavy with tension, not from heat but from something else. Expectation, unease, a sense that something big was about to break. The room was full, activists in the back, legal observers, a few journalists pretending to be interns, and a clerk who kept glancing at the door like she knew a storm was about to walk through it. At the center of it all sat Judge Harold Whitman, a man whose black robe seemed to cling tighter than usual around his broad shoulders. Known for his stern demeanor and fierce opposition to anything remotely connected to Donald Trump, Whitman had built a reputation over decades. To his critics, he was the last firewall for the liberal elite. To his defenders, he was the law incarnate. But one thing was certain. He was not a man who liked being challenged. Today's case was supposed to be routine. On the docket, a hearing on financial misconduct involving a Christian nonprofit called the Citizens of Hope Foundation, an organization known for community outreach, pro-life advocacy, and its vocal support for conservative values. The accusation: financial fraud and tax misreporting. The evidence, according to the prosecution, was vague, but for Judge Whitman, the decision seemed already made. No delays, no dramatics. He muttered to his bailiff as the door swung open. That's when Karoline Leavitt walked in, young, confident, focused, wearing a navy blue blazer, her signature cross necklace, and carrying a thick black folder under her arm. She didn't enter like a political spokesperson. She entered like a soldier stepping onto hostile ground. People turned. Some whispered. Others raised phones discreetly. She didn't flinch. She nodded to the court staff and made her way to the witness table. Her eyes scanned the room, not in fear but in calculation. Her presence felt out of place in the rigid solemnity of federal court, and yet somehow it fit. She wasn't here to blend in. She was here to break something open. Whitman didn't look up at first. He tapped his pen against the gavel with audible impatience. "Let the record show that Miss Leavitt has arrived," the clerk announced, almost apologetically. Whitman finally glanced up. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, and then came the sneer. "Oh, how special," he said aloud, not bothering to hide the sarcasm. "Tell her this isn't the White House. Her title means nothing here." A quiet gasp rippled through the room, but Karoline just raised an eyebrow. She didn't say a word. Not yet. She placed the folder gently on the table before her, sat down, and folded her hands. She wasn't here to be liked. She wasn't here to be silenced. She was here to reveal something that Judge Whitman and everyone connected to him hoped would never see the light of day. As the clock struck 10:03 a.m., the first gavel hit echoed through the chamber. "Let's proceed," Whitman barked. But deep down, he already felt it. Today wasn't going to go the way he planned. Judge Whitman's gavel still echoed faintly across the courtroom as the first witness took her place. Yet the real battle hadn't even started. Karoline Leavitt sat quietly, her hands resting on the black folder in front of her. She didn't flinch under the scrutiny of the courtroom. In fact, her stillness only made her stand out more, like the one person who wasn't pretending. Judge Harold Whitman cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Let's get something straight before we begin," he said, his voice sharp, hollow, and loaded. "This is my courtroom. I don't care who you work for or what viral clip you starred in last week. You don't run this show. I do." Karoline didn't blink. Whitman narrowed his eyes. "You Gen Z activists think you can just stroll in here and spout talking points, like it's TikTok Live." His tone turned mocking. "This isn't a press briefing. This isn't cable news. This is federal court. You're not special, Miss Leavitt. You're just another political puppet with a folder full of fiction." A quiet murmur rolled through the courtroom. In the back row, a man in a flannel suit leaned to his neighbor and whispered, "This guy's really going for it." But Karoline remained calm. She stood slowly, deliberately, and looked Judge Whitman square in the eye. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she said, her voice clear, The law is not your personal weapon. Injustice isn't supposed to bow to your political opinions. The room froze. Whitman's jaw tensed. He leaned back in his chair for a moment, silent, as if stunned by the nerve. Then he lurched forward. "You dare lecture me in my courtroom?" He spat, now fully animated. "You think waving around a title and a Twitter following gives you authority here?" "No, sir," Karoline replied evenly. "I came here with facts, not followers." Whitman's face turned a deeper shade of red. "Watch your tone, Miss Leavitt." "I'm watching yours," she said calmly, not backing down. That was the moment everything changed. The room didn't just go quiet, it shifted. You could feel it. Like the crowd had realized this wasn't just another court hearing. "This was a standoff. Sit down," Whitman barked, "or I'll have you removed." Karoline didn't move. "If defending truth requires being removed," she replied, "then I won't stop you." The clerk sitting near the front visibly tensed, her hands trembling above the notepad. Even the stenographer hesitated for a second, eyes darting between the two figures at the center of the storm. "I said sit down," Whitman thundered, slamming his gavel again. But Karoline took a single step forward. Her hands remained calm at her sides, but her voice sharpened. "This isn't about me. It's about a foundation you've already decided is guilty, about evidence you're refusing to hear, about the people you're supposed to protect." Whitman shook his head in disbelief. "You're out of line." "No, Your Honor," she replied. "You are." That line didn't just echo, it detonated. Phones quietly tilted upward around the room. Spectators leaned in. Someone in the gallery whispered, "Oh, she's got fire." Judge Whitman pointed at her with a trembling finger. "Last warning," he hissed. "You speak one more word without permission and I will hold you in contempt of court." Karoline gave a slight shrug. "Then you'll be holding the truth. In contempt with me." The gavel slammed again, loud and desperate. "Enough." For a moment, all you could hear was the hum of the air conditioner and the slow, rhythmic scribble of a pen across the court reporter's pad. Whitman stared at her like she had just pulled the rug out from under years of courtroom dominance. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't grandstanding. She was simply standing still, present, unshaken. "You're not a lawyer," he growled. "You're not part of the legal team. You are not recognized in this courtroom." "I'm recognized." "By the people who still believe in the law," she replied. "The people you've been paid to serve. The ones you're now trying to silence." The room gasped again. Whitman reached for his water, hand trembling. He sipped but barely swallowed. His eyes darted to the clerk, as if searching for backup. But the young woman only looked down, avoiding eye contact. This wasn't the script he expected. Karoline's next words came like a scalpel. "I came here to testify on behalf of citizens of Hope. I carry documents that prove they were audited, cleared, and compliant. I have receipts. I have signatures. And I have recordings, all of which you'll probably try to suppress." Whitman slammed the gavel again, twice this time. "This is not a stage for your political agenda." Karoline's voice didn't rise. "Truth isn't political, but corruption always is." In the back, someone gasped audibly. A phone flash blinked. Whitman stood abruptly, face flushed, one hand clinging to the gavel, the other now pointing directly at her. "You're playing a dangerous game, young lady." Karoline raised her chin. "No, I'm calling one out. And—" At that moment, for the first time, Judge Harold Whitman didn't look furious. He looked afraid. Silence. That was all that followed Karoline's final words in the previous exchange. No rebuttal, no gavel slam, no shouting. Just a federal judge standing stiff behind the bench, trying not to let his shaking hand be seen, and a Gen Z woman staring him down with a calmness that shouldn't have been possible in a room like this. Then, without raising her voice, Karoline placed her hand on the black folder. The sound of the clasp opening echoed across the courtroom. "Like thunder, since you've questioned my purpose here," she began, "let me make it clear. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to submit evidence that this court has willfully ignored." Judge Whitman scoffed, trying to regain his footing. "Evidence?" he snapped. "I've already reviewed the case file. You're wasting everyone's time with conspiracy theories and right-wing propaganda." Karoline flipped open the folder. "Let's start with the Barclays transfer," she said, pulling out a printed bank statement. She held it up for the room to see, then walked forward and handed a copy to the clerk, who looked nervously at Whitman before accepting it. "The 18th of March, 2024, Karoline continued. A wire transfer of $120,000 was deposited into a Cayman Islands account under the name H. Whitman. The sender, Atlantic Fund Holdings, LLC. Gasps. Cameras clicked. The court photographer's hand visibly trembled as he took the shot. Whitman's nostrils flared. "That's fabricated." Karoline didn't flinch. "It includes your routing number, sir, and your signature on the account. If you'd like to deny it under oath, feel free." She pulled out the second document. This one might be harder to dispute. The paper shook slightly in her hand, not from fear but from the weight of what it represented. The 5th of April, 2024. Internal email from your courthouse account. To a known Atlantic Fund contact. Quote, "Citizens has been handled per expectations. Payment received. Awaiting further instructions." The courtroom erupted in gasps. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. Whitman's face turned pale, then flushed. "That's a lie," he barked, gavel slamming down. "This is contempt. That email is stolen property." Karoline met his rage with steady resolve. "This is transparency, something your bench has lacked for a long time. You don't get to walk in here and throw accusations like mud on a wall," he roared. "Then let's hear your voice say, 'It,'" she interrupted, reaching into her pocket. Whitman froze. From the depths of her coat, Karoline produced a small audio recorder. She held it up slowly, deliberately, and clicked play. The voice that emerged from the device was unmistakable. It was his. "Scrub all the citizens' audit files from the docket. If anyone asks, say they were never submitted. I don't want that mess getting into trial." The court exploded in whispers. Reporters raised their phones. Someone in the back let out a stunned, "Oh my God." Judge Whitman gripped the edge of the bench so tightly his knuckles turned white. "That recording is illegal," he bellowed. "I'll have you arrested for wiretapping." "You can't." He stopped mid-sentence. Because in that moment something else broke. A voice, soft, trembling, rose from the front corner of the courtroom. I can confirm that." All heads turned. It was the court clerk, a young woman named Erin Shaw, no older than 27, who had been silent the entire time. She stood slowly, eyes wide and glassy, her voice shaking. "He made me do it," she said. "He told me to delete the audit records. He said if I didn't, I'd lose my job." Tears slid down her cheeks. "He said no one would believe me if I spoke up. He said he'd ruin me." Whitman spun toward her. "That's not true, Erin. Don't you dare." She backed away from the bench. "You lied to everyone, to the court, and you used me to help. Cover it up." The room erupted again. People rose from their seats. Reporters whispered into their phones, relaying details to editors. Court staff froze. Even the stenographer had stopped typing. Karoline stepped forward. "This is not just about one nonprofit," she said. "It's about a pattern, a system, an abuse of trust." She held up a third document, an audit log showing record deletions from the court's internal server, time-stamped to the day the email had been sent. "Here's the trail," she said. "Every move made, every file wiped, and it all points." "Back to your login, Your Honor." Whitman's lips trembled. His hands darted for the gavel, but it was no longer a symbol of control. It was a panic button. Slam, slam, slam. "Enough. Sit down. This isn't a courtroom, it's a circus," he shouted. A voice from the gallery cut through the chaos. "No, sir. This is what justice looks like." Whitman's eyes darted wildly. "This is all fake. It's all been orchestrated by Trump's people. I'm just a messenger," Karoline said firmly, "who came with the truth, and you're terrified of it." He stared at her for a long moment, then his knees buckled slightly. The man, who had once ruled over a courtroom like a king, now looked like he didn't even know where he was. Lost. Exposed. Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply placed the final document on the table. "And we're not done yet." For a moment, Whitman didn't say a word. He just stood there, jaw twitching, shoulders heaving, the color drained from his face. Karoline's final sentence. And we're not done yet. Hung in the air like a loaded gun. Then, suddenly, he snapped. With a yell that sounded more like a wounded animal than a federal judge, Whitman lunged forward, knocking over the water pitcher on his desk, arms reaching for the folder in front of Karoline. "No one will believe you," he roared, snatching the papers from her hands with both fists. Karoline didn't flinch. With chilling calm, she stepped back and simply said, "The FBI has the originals. That was just the presentation copy." Whitman froze mid-rip. A few sheets had already been torn, fluttering to the floor like feathers. But her words struck him harder than anything else. For the first time in his career, he had lost control, and everyone saw it. A gasp swept through the courtroom. Phones were raised. Cameras clicked. The clerk dropped her pen. The powerful man behind the bench had just physically attacked the evidence. And then Karoline pressed a button on the recorder again. This time, it wasn't just a quote. It was a full conversation. "So, what's the situation with citizens?" Whitman's voice, clear as day, replied, "Handled. I made sure the audit never reached the record. Atlantic said the next transfer will be bigger. Just make sure the media doesn't sniff this one out." "Understood," said the other voice. "How about the Reed case?" Same playbook. Delay, discredit, disappear. The audio played without interruption. People in the room audibly gasped. One woman put a hand to her heart. Another whispered, "He just admitted it." Whitman's body swayed slightly. No, he muttered, clutching the desk for balance. "That's doctored. Someone's framing me." Karoline stared at him, unshaken. Cold. Clear. "Then why are you panicking, Your Honor?" Whitman's breathing grew ragged. His eyes darted across the room. "You think this proves anything?" he barked. "You think people care? They'll forget. They always do." His eyes locked on the door behind the bench, the private chambers. And then, in a move that stunned everyone, he turned and ran. He didn't walk. He didn't call for order. He bolted, a full sprint toward the back exit, arms flailing, knocking over a chair. But before he reached the door, 2 court officers stepped in. "Sir, you can't leave the courtroom," one said firmly, stepping forward to block his path. Whitman skidded to a stop, breathing hard. His face was soaked with sweat. His robe flapped wildly around him like a cape coming loose from a broken king. "Move!" he yelled. "I'm a federal judge. You answer to me." "No, sir," the officer replied. "Not anymore." The door behind them creaked, open. In stepped a team of 4 federal agents, suits pressed, expressions grim. Leading them was a tall man with a badge clipped to his breast pocket. He held a warrant in one hand. "Judge Harold Whitman," he said, voice booming across the silent room. "You are under arrest for obstruction of justice, destruction of federal evidence, and conspiracy to commit fraud." Gasps erupted. Cameras clicked like machine guns. A man in the gallery shouted, "Arrest him now!" Whitman turned to the agents, eyes wild. "You can't do this! I have immunity! I'm protected! I have people!" The lead agent didn't flinch. "Those people won't help you now, sir," he said. Then he signaled, and 2 agents approached. Their handcuffs clicked open with a cold finality. Whitman stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own robe. "Don't touch me. I'm innocent." "This is political. It's a hoax. It's all her." He pointed straight at Karoline, fingers shaking like a leaf in the wind. "She's working for Trump. She forged everything. You're all being played." Karoline didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than any argument. One of the agents grabbed Whitman's arm and gently but firmly turned him around. The cuffs went on, click, click. The courtroom exploded in noise. Half the room stood and cheered, others cried. Phones live-streamed the moment. "Justice served," someone said under their breath. Another chanted, "Leavitt! Leavitt!" Judge Whitman, who once sat above all, was now standing in cuffs, sweat dripping down his neck, mouth half open as though he was still trying to come up with a line that might undo it all. But nothing came out. The clerk, Erin, still sitting near the bench, sobbed quietly into her hands. One of the agents crouched beside her and whispered something, probably telling her she was safe now. Karoline stood still at the center of it all, not smiling, not crying, just steady. Whitman turned one last time, eyes burning into Karoline's face. "You think you've won, little girl?" he hissed. "There'll be others. You can't stop all of us." Karoline tilted her head, slightly. Her words came slow and cold. "No, Your Honor. I didn't win." She paused. The truth did. The cuffs clanked as they locked around Judge Harold Whitman's wrists. A man once cloaked in power was now escorted down the courtroom aisle, past the very citizens he once silenced. But the true story was just beginning. Karoline Leavitt stood, steady near the witness stand, her hands now empty. The physical documents were gone, but what remained was more powerful. The truth she had just unleashed. It was over, but it wasn't finished. As she turned to leave, one of the court officers spoke. "Miss Leavitt." She turned. He nodded once. "Respectfully, thank you." She smiled for the first time that day, soft, tired, but real. "You're welcome," she said, and with that, Karoline walked out, not as a spokesperson, not as a witness, but as a symbol of resilience, of justice, of what one voice could do when backed by nothing more than conviction and courage. The courthouse behind her had gone still, but Karoline Leavitt's steps were steady. Justice had spoken. The gavel had fallen, but what remained wasn't silence. It was momentum. As the sun set behind the Atlanta skyline, painting the streets golden crimson, Karoline slipped into the back seat of a black SUV waiting by the curb. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Beside her, news alerts, voice messages, tags, reposts. She ignored them all. For the first time that day, she let her shoulders rest. The ride home was quiet. No aides, no cameras, just her, the low hum of the engine, and the echoes of everything that had just happened. They pulled into the driveway of a modest home tucked in a quiet Virginia suburb. Porch lights flickered on as she stepped out. The weight of the folder she no longer carried seemed to lift from her hands, replaced by something even heavier and holier. Responsibility. She opened the front door. Inside, warm light poured from the kitchen. Toys lay scattered on the carpet. Somewhere, the soft hum of a lullaby played from a baby monitor, and then, "Mommy!" a small voice. A toddler in footy pajamas rounded the corner, arms outstretched. Karoline dropped to her knees just in time to catch him. She held him tight. "Mommy did the right thing today," she whispered into his ear, her voice shaking. Not with fear, but with purpose. "For you. For all of us." Her husband, Daniel, stood by the doorway, arms folded, eyes damp. A former Marine, he'd always been the one with calm resolve. But tonight, even he was visibly moved. "I saw the live stream," he said. "The moment you stood your ground, the way you stared Whitman down." He paused. "Karoline, you changed history." She smiled softly, resting her forehead against his. "I didn't plan it," she murmured. "But I couldn't walk away, either." "You didn't just hold the line," he replied. "You redrew it." They stood there in silence for a moment, just a family again, untouched by headlines. Later that night, with her son asleep in his crib and the house cloaked in stillness, Karoline sat by the living room window, phone in hand. She opened X, formerly Twitter, stared at the blinking cursor, then typed, "Whitman was only the beginning. The system doesn't clean itself. We do, and we're not done yet. Justice is not optional." She hit post. Within minutes, the message was shared, quoted, and embedded across every major feed in the country. Supporters, legal experts, and journalists all echoed the same sentiment. The reckoning had begun. Meanwhile, deep inside the federal investigation headquarters in Atlanta, agents pored over the Atlantic Fund files. Screens glowed in a dim command center where names, amounts, and case histories lit up in red. A senior agent circled the last 6 judges listed in Whitman's hidden dossier. He pointed to the screen. "Start surveillance. Quietly. If even half of this is real, we're looking at the biggest judicial corruption network in U.S. history." Another agent nodded. "We've already traced 2 new transfers. Cayman accounts." Same shell companies. The first agent stared at the web of connections forming on the board. Time to pull the thread. Back in Virginia, Karoline stood at her kitchen sink, watching the breeze rustle the trees outside. The moment felt almost too quiet, until Daniel came in and placed a small black folder on the counter. "I saved this," he said. "Your original notes from the first hearing might be worth keeping." She picked it up, flipped through the pages. Her own handwriting, underlined quotes, bolded phrases. At the end was a post-it note. It read, "If we're not brave enough to say it, we'll never be strong enough to fix it." She closed the folder gently, then looked up at her husband. "We're going to finish this," she said. "All of it." In a time when truth feels endangered, one woman reminded us that courage isn't about volume. It's about resolve. What do you think? Can one person really spark a change that reaches beyond the courtroom? If this story moved you, made you reflect, or gave you hope, tell us in the comments. Your voice matters here. We'd love to hear where you're watching from and what justice means to you. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for being part of this journey.